Welcome everyone to the program. We begin today with a planned protest by the National Association of Nigerian Students in Abuja. This is against the continuous attacks on Nigerians and their properties in South Africa. Our correspondent Kayla Megwa is monitoring events there, and she gives us this update. Come back to talking to Kayla much later. But Nigeria's leaders are not taking the attacks on its citizens in South Africa lightly, even as President Muhammadu Buhari dispatched a special envoy to convey to President Cyril Ramaphosa his concerns about the situation. President Buhari expressed his displeasure over the treatment of Nigerians, demanding the assurance of their safety. The vice president also criticized the wanton killings of Nigerians in South Africa.
This is the last meeting of the Nigerian president and his South African counterpart during the recently concluded African Development Conference in Japan. A meeting some concluded would put the final nail to the serial attacks on Nigerians on South African soil. That hope would not last. In just days after, the country wakes up to another wave of attacks and looting of foreign-owned businesses, with Nigerians amongst the victims. This latest attack is already generating reactions. President Muhammadu Buhari's immediate reaction is dispatching a special envoy to President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa with a view at getting commitment and assurances of safety for Nigerians.
This recent attack.
The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, also condemned the attacks, which he says are needless.
It's unfortunate. Nigeria has invested a great deal, not only in the destruction of apartheid and the pulling down of apartheid, but again, this is all contrary even to the very ideas that all of the great leaders of South Africa fought for, including the current president. You know, this level of bigotry, this sort of bigotry is just terrible, and it's so completely unacceptable.
On his part, the President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, thinks the wave of xenophobia on Nigerians, if not checked, will grow to consume the continent. According to Mr. Lawan, quote, "I believe we have faced enough. We will no longer take it anymore. The South African Parliament must act fast to put a stop to this menace," end of quote. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, is also unhappy over the attacks. He expressed his displeasure in a tweet where he says, quote, "We'll be cutting short my trip to Tanzania for the 50th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference at CPA Secretariat, and will be leaving today for the leadership of the Art House Nigeria to consider cutting short the recess and reconvening for one day to address the killings of Nigerians in SA," end of quote.
I am not advocating for once retaliatory violence.
But another school of thought is that the government needs to do more than just condemn. It has to take more definite measures to put the evil to rest.
I'm advocating government action in terms of dividends, blocking of dividends, in terms of blocking influx of things coming from South Africa to ShopRite, in terms of what they can do to MTN and all the other investments. I mean, learn a lesson from Trump. You protect your own country by targeting the investments of people who are hostile towards you.
The reactions continue, and Nigerians have begun to show their displeasure, hoping that this will be the last time their brothers and sisters in South Africa are targets of a needless attack.
Let's go back to Abuja, where our correspondent Kayla Megwa has an update. Kayla, we hear there was supposed to be a planned protest by the National Association of Nigerian Students, but that didn't take place.
Hi, Millicent. It's a very interesting day in the nation's capital, to be honest with you. We've been looking at all the protests that have been going on around the city. Right now, at the Lugbe axis of the nation's capital, there are some protests going on there right now. We already have one of our journalists over there to capture those visuals, and we'll be sending them to you shortly. Earlier today, we were at the Jabi Lake Mall that houses ShopRite and other businesses, and while we're there was a rumor about a protest supposed to happen there, but the police protection around the Jabi Lake Mall was so much today. We got those visuals and we sent them to you guys as well. So the process didn't happen there. But we did get with, actually we spoke with the High Commissioner to South Africa. He's Mr. Bobby Monroe, and he was talking to us about the meeting that they have here today. The meeting has started. Now earlier, maybe a few minutes ago, we had some student leaders, is what he called them. He said student leaders, a particular NGO, and a youth group. All right, so they're in meetings with them right now. Now, this is the third time he's talking about an exchange program between youths, media, and of course students going to South Africa to mingle with their counterparts, as he called them, and then they can, work on learning the history of the relationship between both countries, saying that this could bring an end to the xenophobic attacks. So that meeting is on right now. He has promised that he'll be speaking to the press immediately after to tell us what the outcome of that meeting is, and we do have a lot of questions to ask the High Commissioner of South Africa from here at the South African Embassy, which is where we are right now. We're going to be talking to him about a lot of the questions that still linger and how they feel about the reprisal attacks that are going on around the country, Millicent.
All right, thank you, Kayla McGrath, with that update. We'll continue to follow your updates as well on the issue. Well, let's get more perspective on this particular problem. Ambassador Peter Emuze, a former head of missions to the United Nations in Geneva and a UN independent expert on economic, social and cultural rights. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us.
Thank you for having me too.
All right. We also have Mr. Adetunji Omotola, the founder of Xenophobia Victim Support Fund. He joins us from South Africa via Skype as well. Welcome. My first question is to Ambassador Emuze. The federal government says they sent ahead an envoy to South Africa. I mean, many people have criticized that, saying we have a consulate, we have a high commission. Why send a special unit again on this particular issue? But perhaps first, you might want to react to how we got to this point in the first place.
Well, we have excellent bilateral relations with South Africa, and we have always, had this, dialogue on mutual cooperation relations. What happened in the last 3 days or so was a very, very despicable act which was capable of marring our relations. But I believe the Nigerian government has been on top of it, and they have taken all precautionary measures, and sending our envoy to South Africa was part of the process to ensure that normalcy returns in our relations, not that it was, severed anyway, but to add more and in a way or in a veiled manner, register our protest over what, has happened during the last 3 days concerning Nigerians who live in South Africa.
Many people are saying that Nigeria should take a tougher stance, a more concrete stance, decision in tackling this issue, and that they allowed this to fester for too long.
Well, sometimes I think the responsibility actually devolves on the host government, the South African government, to make sure it keeps its people, in line with rules of international engagement. It's not because you have a strike or some protests about unemployment of your people, and then you start attacking foreigners who are resident in your country. So that is the responsibility of the host government. Nigeria has a right, to protest when its nationals are shortchanged or where, they become victims of senseless violence, like in the case which we have witnessed. And Nigeria has risen to the occasion. The president, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, they've done what they are supposed to do. Summoning a foreign envoy to the Foreign Office is serious business in diplomacy. And it is to register the displeasure of the federal government over what is happening to our people and other nationals in South Africa. And that is, from where, they've been able to. Yes, can I hear you?
No, I was going to direct my next question to Mr. Adetunji Omotola, founder of Xenophobia Victim Support Fund. Thank you for joining us. Who are the victims of xenophobia? Are Nigerians the only target?
Well, if you look at the history of South Africa since 1994, there's been a lot of xenophobic attacks. But the one that was the highest profile one was in 2005, when about 2008 rather, when about 69 people died. And in that one, you would have remembered there was a picture image of a Mozambican, a gentleman by the name of Alberto Namauve, who was killed in a place called Ramaphosa Township. And those scenes are still very graphic in many of our minds till today. So there are many victims of xenophobia. I mean, since 1994, we have about 150,000 displaced, marginalized, and some have been maimed or killed. But in the Nigerian community, the figure that we have taken ownership of is about 160 Nigerians have been killed either by a mob, by South Africans, or by the police. And what always happens with those victims is that many of them are young men in their mid-30s and early 30s, and they always leave behind children and widows. And those are the ones that we focus on because many of them are still living in a serious state of poverty and unemployment, given
Mr.
the
Motala,
high figures of unemployment.
So,
yes,
some
please.
people are saying that this has gone beyond xenophobia, that one can call it genocide. Do you agree?
No, I think it's too early. If you look at the fact that these things do not happen every day, I mean, this attack, for example, it just went crazy because the genesis of this complaint was that a taxi driver had been killed, a South African taxi driver, allegedly by Nigerian drug dealers, and that was what created the flare-up. But in fact, the truth is that he was not a Nigerian national. This is by no means genocide. The police have jumped in there. Not only, but 5 people have died, 100 people have been arrested, and I think millions of rand of property has been damaged. I think the critical thing for me is that the Nigerian government has stepped in, but they always step in a little too late, because a month ago, if you remember, the Nigerian Senate, they made a statement, but they didn't follow up.
What are your thoughts on this Pew research in 2018 about how South Africans feel about foreign nationals?
Well, thank you. All I know is that it is, the right of the South African government to receive, foreigners in its territory who have genuine, legitimate business to do. But so long as you have this in your territory, there are some, minimum international requirements for their safety, security, and upkeep. And I think in this particular area, there has been some deficiency in that there has been, insufficient, ability to, control the local population against the attacks on foreigners in the country, what has been referred to as xenophobic attacks and hatred.
To Mr. Omotola, I mean, with all of this that's happening, the Vice President, Nigeria's Vice President, has said it's unacceptable. The Senate President has said that Parliament should act fast. Many people are saying the AU should weigh in. We also have the World Economic Forum that's taking place in Cape Town, and reports unconfirmed are saying that some African leaders are boycotting that. What's your reaction to all of this?
Look, I think the Nigerian government, or especially this current administration, has not been very, very strong in looking at the diaspora situation. I mean, you know that South Africa is a very violent country. There's about 20,000 murders in South Africa every year. And in 2018, out of those 20,000 murders, 1,700 were women. And even just a few days ago, you'd have heard about a young student of University of Cape Town that was murdered by an employee in a government post office. I mean, he lured her into this post office and bludgeoned her to death. So South Africa is a very violent country, and the history is very violent. And some of our people also, as you know, they're not doing great things here. I mean, they stand on the streets and they're selling drugs. And in fact, this whole attack, that's why the South Africans are saying it's not xenophobia, is related to drugs. But the government of Nigeria must find a way to ensure that its citizens who are in foreign climes do not get into harm's way by committing crime. There's so many Nigerians here who are doing great things, but those Nigerians who are doing great things are not very visible because they are hiding. We have to be tough on crime, and we have to be tough on the causes of crime. Nigerians who are committing crime in South Africa need to be stopped, and maybe this is a good time for the Nigerian government to take responsibility and work with the South African government to ensure that is stopped. Because until that is dealt with, there will always be this problem all the time.
Ambassador Mezue, your final thoughts. How can we nip this in the bud? Seeing also that we're having these protests and of South African businesses as well being looted in Nigeria.
Well, it is not, advisable to have that kind of scenario, given that Nigerian businesses too were destroyed. I think we should allow peace to reign. The measures the federal government has taken are good ones. The Nigerian foreign minister has, summoned the South African envoy here, and a special envoy of Mr. President has been sent to South Africa. So we should allow nerves to cool for now and see what happens. Although whatever damages that Nigerians have incurred in the process of these protests in South Africa, Nigeria must strongly demand that they get their reparations.
All right, we'd like to thank you so much, our guest, Mr. Adintuji Omotola, founder of Xenophobia Victim Support Fund, and also Ambassador Peter Mezue, a former head of missions to the United Nations in Geneva.